All right, welcome to the Morning Grind. I'm Dean. In just a second, we're going to talk to Notorious about the Charles Schwab Challenge, where we're going to talk about how to win $1 million this weekend on DK playing golf. And look at this seamless segue. We want to thank our friends over at DraftKings because, again, the qualifying fantasy golf millionaire contest that starts Thursday, June 11th. Users can compete for $1 million as a top prize. The winner will also be awarded with a ticket for free entry into the Fantasy Tournament of Champions Final. Now, the Fantasy Tournament of Champions Final, that's going to be held during the big game in Tampa. Now, the users will compete for another $1 million top prize there. Eligibility restrictions do apply, and see DraftKings.com for details. Without further ado, let's talk to Noto about golf. Welcome back to the Morning Grind. This is Dean with you once again. No, it's not Stevie. Of course, this is Stevie's podcast. He'll be back with you soon enough. Of course, he's knocking out all the NASCAR content. If you guys want to hit him up with that, you know where to find it on RotoGrinders.com. Speaking of content, this week we have a millionaire maker going down in the golf worlds and the golf streets, which means we got to bring in the OG himself, Derek Farnsworth. You guys know him as Notorious. Noto, I assume you are giddy. I assume you're excited at the prospect of a Milly Maker for PGA golfers, none of which are on the Outlaw Tour. These are real golfers.
Hey, you watch your mouth. Outlaw Tour is where it's at. I actually got my Outlaw Tour hoodie on for those of you watching the video. No, but I'm definitely excited to have PGA back, and this is the most work I've done in the last couple of days and I have in the last few months, maybe combined. I don't know. I've done a bunch of articles, and here at RotoGrinders, I think this is the most PGA content we've ever had because we brought on Tambo, and then we got our usual stuff from Red Kachik and Trey and STL. So everyone's pumped, everyone's ready to go, and I typically don't like to fire at the Milly Maker, but hey, it's been months. We got to get going. Let's go.
Why do you not like firing at the Milly Maker? Myself personally, I don't like contests that are top heavy. And last week was MMA, which I think was $2.5 million and $1 million at the top, which is 40%. This is $3 million. And $20 to buy in, $1 million at the top, which is a 33%. Is that the same sort of justification, the same sort of reasoning? Like you're almost definitely going to lose money in this contest?
Yeah, essentially. What's the buy-in this week? 20 or 25? 20. So I'm paying $3,000 to hope to have a sweat on Sunday. So I don't know. I'm going to do it because it's the first one back in a while. But I generally treat it as a sunk cost and hope the rest of my lineups kind of pay for it.
Yeah, and you're shooting for some upside, and some people just look at it as entertainment. Like you said, you're paying for the potential of a sweat. Let's run that down real quick before we break down the what is this? The Charles Schwab. What are we calling this? There you go, the Charles Schwab Challenge. I believe it's in Texas. I was checking that out as well too. Let's give a shout out to the podcast because Tyler Tambo was on this podcast earlier, about a week or so ago, and you mentioned as far as the video, we are not just on the podcast feed, we're on YouTube as well. There are lots of fun interviews on there that are evergreen. You guys can check those out too. But yeah, Tyler's podcast, that's the Fantasy Degenerates. Am I butchering that? Is that correct?
Yep. Fantasy Degenerates podcast.
Your article, I was taking a peek at that before we went live here as well. The core plays. What else is up there? Oh, I was also checking out the expert survey. Like you said, there's 5 different experts listed in there, including Tambo and STL Cards and yourself. Additionally, there's the lineup HQ. And is this new or is this something I've never noticed before? I was looking at the lineup HQ and there's win probability, top 10, top 20%, the chance of making a cut. Is this just something I've never seen? I'm not a golf guy, to be clear. So I was not aware of the existence of this if it was a thing before.
Yeah, so in lineup HQ, all that stuff's been there before. We've had our own projections up there for a while with all the probabilities, which is really nice. The conviction plays that Tambo's doing, that's new. Those tags are up there. And then you have your GPP article from STL, your value article from Red Kachik. There's 4 free articles out there for those of you that aren't premium members. I wrote 2 of them, one on projections, one on salary analysis. STL has a nice preview article for the course. And then my first look, which has course history and Vegas odds and salaries, is always free every week. So regardless of, if you're a premium member or not, there's a lot of good content out there.
And there's also premium podcasts, correct?
Yes, the premium show, we recorded it last night, should be live now. DFS for Drive for Show, DFS for Dough. I get that wrong every single time. So that one's out. And then the Degenerate podcast is free. That should be up on our feed as well. So a lot of good stuff. And then the Lineup HQ show with Tambo, I'll be doing that tomorrow. That's a weekly thing that he'll be doing. He'll just be rotating us experts in and out, kind of looking at different player pools and building some Milly Maker lineups. So that should be a lot of fun.
If I did not expose myself already as far as not being a golf expert, I'm not a golf expert. So anything Noto says, listen to him. Do not listen to me. I'm just going to be asking some questions. Hopefully they make sense. It's my understanding, the research that I have done, that this is kind of an unprecedented situation, obviously, where a lot of these guys have not golfed in a long time. And people are suggesting that makes this kind of a wild card and just kind of a little more guesswork this week as far as trying to figure out who's going to do well, who's not going to do well, who was staying in golf shape, who was getting their hacks in, who wasn't. Is this something you're considering as far as building lineups this week?
Yeah, it's definitely more of a qualitative week than quantitative week. There's a lot of factors that I typically don't look at. I'm kind of scouring social media pages to see if guys have been practicing, see if they've been grinding. We've had a couple guys come out and say that they've just struggled to stay motivated. Adam Hadwin's one of them. He was one of the guys that would look good in my projections at first, but I might have to talk myself out of him. John Rahm in his press conference today said he hadn't touched a club in 7 weeks. So that's a little concerning. He's one of the more expensive guys in the field. Doesn't mean he can't come out and win, but the fact that he took that long of a layoff is a little worrisome. And then you have other guys that have been playing in these mini tour events. A couple of them played in the Arizona one. There have been 2 mini tour events in Texas, a couple in Florida as well. So this is the kind of stuff that, could be the difference maker. But if you have a strong take one way or another, I'm not going to talk you out of it. I've heard some people say target the guys with no kids because they've been out on the course. But I mean, I just can't, look up how many kids everyone has and then make my lineups based off that. But a lot of different narratives you can take this week.
Yeah, it's really interesting as far as that route. And like you said, you can tell a story any way you want to tell it, but you can manipulate it any way you like. And sure, you can play the results depending on and say, well, that's the reason why they won, because they don't have any kids. And much easier when it's all said and done, I suppose. That's interesting as far as Rahm saying he hasn't touched the club in 7 weeks. He's the second most expensive guy. We'll talk about him soon enough. Talk to me about this course. What is distinct about this course? What kind of golfers do I want on this course?
Yeah, so this is what I would call a plotter's course. And what I mean by that is it's a little bit shorter. The fairways are pretty narrow. There's a lot of trouble if you're too wild off the tee. So a lot of golfers aren't going to be hitting a ton of drivers. And when that happens, it kind of takes the elite's biggest weapon out of the play. So Rory McIlroy, Rahm, JT, all of them, gain a ton of strokes off the tee because they're really good with their driver. Then you have a lot of shorter guys like Jordan Spieth, Kevin Na, Kevin Kisner. Historically, they really struggle off the tee. They're not the longest hitters, but they do compete at this track because you don't really need to hit it too far here. So it's more of a second shot golf course. If you're looking at, one strokes gain stat, I would look at strokes gain approach over the other 3. I do think around the green is going to be important. The greens are pretty hard to hit, and we're not going to have the grandstands this week. There's no fans in attendance, so golfers aren't going to be able to hit it off of the grandstands. If they shoot it over the green, it's going to go way over the green, and that's something they're not going to be used to. So there's going to be more scrambling opportunities. Green regulation, I think, is going to be key. And then if you like putting splits, I'm sure you're big into putting splits, Dean. These greens are bent grass. So if you want to look at that, I certainly don't mind it. There's a handful of guys that typically play a lot better on bent grass than they do on Bermuda or POA.
So there's normally grandstands, and sometimes when players shank the ball, the grandstands will save them because it stops them essentially. So if you screw up, you're more likely to get penalized for your screw up. Basically, is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and you won't be able to bounce it off fans' heads. We see that every single week. And then also like wild drives, I think that we should have a few more lost balls this week because typically when somebody hits it, way offline, all the fans will run towards the ball and circle it. I don't know if you've seen that happen. It's quite. It's like they've never seen a golf ball before. 20 people just run after a ball and just make a circle out of it.
Nobody's going to be yelling Baba Booey. How does that change things?
Yeah, that's true too. And maybe for round 4 showdown, I'm getting ahead of myself here, but if some of the younger guys are in one of the final groups, maybe they're not as nervous without all the fans and, all that outside pressure. So that's something to keep an eye on. And, Devin told us to mention the round four showdown, Tambo is going to be doing a video for that as well. So that will be up on Saturday night, probably.
Is that premium or your regular? You're not really sure.
Pretty sure it's premium, but I'm not 100% positive.
Fair enough. Hey, your boy Tiger's not playing. Is it a strong field? Because I recognize a lot of these names. Are most of the regular guys playing? I know Tiger's not playing. He's up to something else, I suppose. But first of all, that's your guy. What are you going to do? Like, what's Plan B now?
Yeah, it's kind of good that he's not playing. When he plays, I have to have him in my main lineup. That's just how it is. He's the one guy that I have a bias for that I can't get over. If he were to win an event and not be in my lineup, I would be pretty upset. So he's not playing. Adam Scott's not playing. Patrick Cantlay's not playing, but pretty much all the other elites are here. And that's typically not the case for this tournament because, like I said, this is a plotter's course, and typically the guys like Rory don't really like to play these courses. They like to play the big courses where they have a bigger edge. So it should be interesting with all these big names.
So a lot of these guys would typically skip it, but because I guess they're antsy, they've been sitting around for a long time, they're going to give it a go. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yep, exactly.
All right. So DK traditionally, not golf. I can't speak to golf at least. When they do their millionaire makers, a lot of times they will fudge salaries and make it so that the average Joe can get a lineup they like. They make it guys a little bit cheaper. How like loose or tight is the cap this week?
I think it's pretty good. I don't think DraftKings necessarily tries to do that on purpose. It's just that in the majors, there's so many good golfers that it just feels like your lineups are easier to make because, the guys that are 80-1 are golfers that instead of guys that you don't know in a typical tournament. So I think the pricing is pretty good. There's not any particularly obvious values, and there's a lot of good plays in the 7K range. So you're definitely going to like the way your lineups look, which is definitely good for Milly Makers because that means you're going to be adding more.
Yeah, I was looking at the expert survey, and I don't know how. I think this guy's kind of cheap. No, he's not even that cheap, actually. Who's your favorite golfer for cash? For some reason, I thought he would be cheaper than he actually was. But Webb Simpson, I'm not going to give away the entire expert survey, obviously, but just something I saw on there I thought was kind of interesting. 4 out of 5 guys, including yourself, say Webb Simpson is your favorite player for cash. Why is that?
So if you want to take any of the guys at the top, you certainly can. Rory's the best player in the world. Rahm, I do worry about what he said, but he does have 2 top 5s here. JT, one of the best players in the world. And then Bryson struggles at this course, but he has been practicing a lot. The safest of the bunch for me is Webb, and he's cheaper than the other 4. He has 2 top 5s here as well. He's not the longest off the tee. He's one of those guys that hits fairways. He's good with his irons, and then he's one of the best on and around the greens. So I think that's really going to play this week. In an interview I heard with him, he said it reminds him of the courses he played growing up. He loves these greens, loves these shorter tracks where you can't really take advantage of the par 5s. There's only 2 par 5s this week. So again, that definitely hurts the bombers more than the shorter hitters. So I think Webb's going to be the safest play of the bunch. This is golf. There's a ton of variance involved. He could come out and miss the cut, but I think he's the best option if you're only making one lineup and you want to start with a more balanced approach.
How many lineups you plan on making this week?
So I generally do one main that I put into all the single entry 3 max stuff and some double ups. I play a little bit of double ups, and then I'll probably do 100 to 150 in the Milly Maker.
Oh, you mentioned JT, Justin Thomas. I think it was him that had this quote. Maybe it was somebody else, one of the big name golfers I recognized. He was commenting about Mike being mic'd up. And I feel like this is my guess here. Again, amateur golf novice, whatever you want to call me. It was a popular thing during the Peyton Manning, Brady thing, and TV ratings were huge, and people loved the conversation stuff. Is that something they're talking about in golf as far as having these guys mic'd up to some degree?
So they had JT mic'd up. He was the commentator, the on-course commentator. He wasn't actually playing. So he was just out there, with the microphone, just making fun of him the whole time. That's probably what you're referring to. But he was great. I mean, he was better than the guys that they have on the TV trucks now. So I don't think they're going to be doing that, with actual players. But it would be fun.
It would be fun. It would make for a better product, and just all the sports, I would imagine.
You will be able to hear, the golfers talk at least a little bit more without any crowds. So that'll be fun. I think there's 4 PGA Tour live groups, featured groups that are going to be available to watch in addition to the TV coverage. So I'll definitely be checking those out as well.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Like different stations showing the same thing?
Yeah, you just have to go online, and they have 4 different groups, 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon for Thursday and Friday, and then they'll probably mix it up on Saturday.
Did you like Barkley talking smack to Brady?
Yeah, I missed when it actually happened, but I thought it was pretty good. I love Chuck. I don't know why. I think
He's a good
great.
personality.
Yeah.
You don't always have to agree with him, but he's a good personality.
Yeah,
He's
exactly.
fun to have around. All right. Oh, by the way, you mentioned the two different groups. As I know we're recording this on Tuesday morning. Thursday, of course, when the tournament starts. Any issues with weather as far as we can tell? Do we need Roth right now?
That's a good question. Let me check that right now, actually.
Oh, well, we can. I'll let you figure that in the fly, and we'll get back to that, I suppose. Stars and scrubs are balanced lineup, but what's our general approach right now?
So in the Milly Maker, I'll always have a mix of both because you're able to, mix different exposures. But for my main lineup, I think I'm going to be starting with Webb. And because I do, it'll be more balanced. You can play Webb. You can play two guys in the 9K range, or you can pair them up with two guys in the 8K range and then still have an average salary of around, 72 to 75, which is kind of the sweet spot for me. There's 10 golfers or so in that $300 price range that I think are really good options.
Amongst the big boys, we mentioned some of the names, kind of ran them down. We talked about JT and Simpson, McIlroy up top. Who's your least favorite? Who's the guy you're most likely to favor that's expensive?
Probably going to be Bryson DeChambeau. I'm really high on him in the immediate future, but this is kind of the worst track for him. He's bulked up over the last year. I think he's gained 40 or 50 pounds. I don't know if you've seen him, but he's now the longest hitter on tour. And he's just spending his whole quarantine just trying to hit it as far as he can. He just keeps posting videos of himself swinging as hard as he can. I don't think that's really going to play this week. And the fact that he's missed 3 or 4 cuts here probably doesn't help either. So I'm hoping he misses the cut this week, misses the cut next week, and then I can fire him up at a tournament where he actually can use that driver.
Yeah, I just Google imaged him. I was expecting like a John Daly type, and I guess he's just strong, right? We're talking about muscles.
Yeah, so he's pretty big. He's decided to have a gymnast body is what he wants to do, which I didn't think gymnasts were that. I guess they're pretty buff, but
they're strong.
He's just trying to put on weight. Yeah.
Yeah. I just don't know how it translates to golf. I have no idea, but we'll see how that plays out for him.
He's always fighting with Brooks Koepka about who's stronger, and Koepka calls him fat.
He's always the guy asking how much you bench.
Yeah.
How would you bench? All right. Let's kind of work our way down here as far as some other questions I had loaded up for you. All right. So general cash plays. I know you like Simpson. Other guys that can sort of like salary savers. What do you have that can kind of make things work for you?
All right. So in the mid 7Ks, so many options. Like I mentioned, Harris English is probably my favorite. He was playing really well before the break. He's won on tour number of times, 5+ years ago, and then he just struggled. The last 6 months, 8 months or so, he's really turned his game around. Even when he struggled, he had top 30 finishes at this event in 3 straight years. He's already got 5 top 10s this season. At the Players Championship, before it got canceled, he got out to a 65, so he was 6 or 7 under after the first day. One of the better guys in terms of green and regulation. Everyone's betting him, so he will be pretty popular. So if you don't like chalk, I probably wouldn't play him, but he's probably my favorite option there. Moving down a little bit, 7,400, there's 3 guys that I really like. Billy Horschel, he's just one of those guys that is solid. He's going to make a lot of cuts. He can gain strokes off the tee, on approach, on and around the greens. Doesn't really have a weakness in his game, which is always nice. Benny On is a DFS fan favorite because he can't putt. He's great everywhere else, and then he misses 3-foot putts like crazy. In my stat model here, he's 138th in this field in putting, and there are 148 golfers in the field. So that just goes to show you how bad he is at putting. But that makes it more fun when you're watching him on Shot Tracker. You have to really pay attention. If he's 20
it depends
feet
how you
out,
define fun, but I'm sure, yeah.
If he's 20 feet out, he might take 3 or 4 putts to get in there.
Is that the Billy Madison approach?
Yeah.
Or Happy Gilmore.
Happy Gilmore.
Yeah, I get my movies confused sometimes.
So I like him. And then I got the home course guy, Ryan Palmer. He actually hopped on the Action Network podcast with Sobel and CSU Ram this week, and this is his home course, and he's played well here in the past. He says if he could bet on himself, he would this week. So take that for what you will.
They won't let him bet on himself?
That's what he said. I don't know.
Why can't he bet on himself? Whatever.
I don't know.
All right. They let Sylvester Stallone bet on himself and Over the Top.
It's probably because they have head-to-head matchups. So, I mean, he could bet against himself.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
probably
for the best.
Probably safe. Just yeah.
I'm just starting a controversy for no particular reason.
If he wins, he'll be just fine money-wise.
Okay, so you mentioned Palmer. This is his home course, and I meant to kind of ask this because you're talking about this is a course that a lot of the big names just wouldn't play, and I think it's my understanding that course history is something that people look at. Are a lot of these guys just have no course history because they just said, "Nah, pass. I'm going to chill. I'm going to stay home because I don't want to go to Texas for this lame tournament."
Yeah, a lot of guys. So Gary Woodland, Rory McIlroy, Justin Thomas, Dustin Johnson. I don't have any course history for them over the last 5 years. So, and another note that I wanted to make about course history is there's a lot of mediocre players with good course history that I probably wouldn't buy into as much this week because the field typically isn't this strong. You typically don't have the Rorys in this field. A guy like Kevin Tway tends to make the cut here every year, but it's a much softer field. And it's typically only 120 golfers. This week there's 148. They kind of let more golfers in just because it's the first tournament back. So I would be a little iffy to just completely trust course history. There's certain guys that you can look at, like your Spieth and Kevin Nas, those type that always play well here. But for the most part, I am weighing course history less than I usually would. And I'm using some comp courses. If you want to check those out, I like Harbor Town and I like the Old White TPC as comp courses. That way you kind of get a broader perspective of guys that play well on shorter par 70s compared to just this course in particular.
When you jump from 120 to 148, does the cut expand as well, I assume?
Nope, cut still top 65 in ties.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So some weeks, you'll have a high 6-6 percentage depending on the field size and depending on, how the chalk does. And then other weeks you'll have, where 1 or 2% of the field only gets all their golfers through the cut. That's kind of what I'm hoping for this week.
Give me some guys that you don't necessarily trust for cash, but are interesting from a variance perspective. You like them in tournaments.
All right, that's a good question. I will go.
Maybe like the guy that's putting all over the place. If his putting is on, like that kind of thing. I don't know why I'm giving you advice. Go ahead, you answer the question.
All right, I'm going to go Ricky Fowler. I'm going to be eating a lot of chalk in the 7K range, like I mentioned. Fowler, we currently have him projected for 8% ownership, which is pretty crazy. He's typically a fan favorite, but he just hasn't played his best golf. He won last year in Phoenix and hasn't really done much since. But he's been grinding out there during this break. He's been playing one-on-one with Justin Thomas pretty much every single day out there in Florida, and he's beaten him more times than not. And then he played in the match with Matthew Wolff, Dustin Johnson, and Rory McIlroy. And I thought he looked better than the other three. He's one of those guys that very good on and around the greens. His driver can be a little wild, so I think that will help him at a course where he's not going to have to hit a lot of them. And if he's going to be less than 10% owned, I think that's a really good option for tournaments.
How about somebody in the mid-tier, somebody in the 7Ks or so?
7Ks. So I think a lot of people are going to be on Jordan Spieth and Kevin Na just because they do have such good course histories. I'll include them in my MME player pool, but they're not going to be contrarian by any means. Spieth's one of the more up and down golfers in terms of DFS. Either love him or hate him. He's got the good course history, but he hasn't played well in a year or so. So I don't know what to do with him. But in terms of the other 7K tournament option, I will go with Ian Poulter. He's more of a safe guy, but I don't think his ownership is going to be too high because you do have a lot of options right there. Neiman, Benyon, Horschel, all going to be pretty popular. English, as I mentioned earlier, is going to be popular. So Ian Poulter, I think he's going to fly under the radar. He's a Euro Tour guy. He's a guy that Americans love to hate because he always beats us in the Ryder Cup. He's sort of their version of Patrick Reed in the Ryder Cup that just gets their side fired up, talks a lot of trash. But he's one of those grinders. He's going to come out. He's going to make the cut. And he's coming off of 4 straight top 35 finishes. So I think he's a really interesting option at 7,300.
Yeah, we should say, again, this podcast being recorded on Tuesday, you referenced ownership percentage and, those kind of things are fluid and that changes and it's going to be more fine-tuned as we come closer and closer to the tournament. I pulled up the ownership percentage as of right now. Our current high percentage owned guy is Rahm, then McIlroy, Simpson, and Scheffler. Any of those guys you're taking a particular stand on are going to be severely overweight or just fade altogether, or probably not?
Oh, man, I'm like you. I like the chalk in pretty much all sports. I don't really have a strong take either way. Rahm's comments today worry me a little bit, but I'll still have some. I'll definitely have some with Rory. As far as Scheffler goes, we talk about form in golf a ton, and he's one of the guys that has actually been playing competitive golf. He played in the 2 Texas mini tour events, and he finished first in one and second in the other. He's from Dallas. He's been inching closer to a win. This is his rookie season. So I think, that high ownership is warranted just because he's one of the few guys that we actually know is in good form and that we actually know has been playing at a competitive level.
Give me somebody that's like 7K and under, like in the garbage bin, I guess you can call it, scraping the barrel, that's going to make the cut.
All right. So in general, I try to stay away from the 6K guys in my main lineup. So I would definitely try to stay above 7K if you can. Furyk would probably be the cheapest guy I would put in, a single entry lineup. He really likes his course, and he's an old man that should play well here. But in terms of under 7K, I think Bud Cauley is probably your safest option. He's really good around the greens. He's very hit or miss with his driver, but he doesn't have to hit a lot of those. You have Andrew Putnam, who has 2 top 20s here. Jimmy Walker always plays well in Texas. He's never missed a cut here. I think he's interesting. And then cheap guy, Mackenzie Hughes, says he's been grinding on his game. I don't really know what that means. We're kind of just taking these guys for what it's worth. But he did have an 8th place finish here last year, and he says, he's been practicing a lot. And from what it sounds like, a lot of these golfers have just been taking advantage of the break, relaxing, getting their rest in. So I like that we're at least hearing positives from him.
I think when you say you're grinding in your game, I think that's the equivalent of like when players show up to spring training and say they're in the best shape of their life. I feel like that's what it is. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll translate. And I'm just going to assume that no news is good news about a player. So if I don't hear them say that they've been practicing or not practicing, then I'm not going to worry about it. But the guys that come out and say that they haven't been practicing much are the ones I would worry about.
Is there anything? I know there's scratches sometimes happen in golf. Are we on edge, or are we more alarmed for that right now, considering the situation, or it's just like the standard sort of approach on that?
I mean, it's really tough in terms of withdrawn because of the COVID. There's a couple guys that you might want to worry about. If somebody happens to come down with it and they continue on with the event, CT Pan withdrew from the players. He was the first one to withdraw. He withdrew before the round 1 even started, and then they eventually canceled it. Mark Leishman, his wife's had a lot of, illnesses. So, he might be a guy that is a little more cautious if somebody ends up testing positive. And then you have the natural withdrawal guys. You have Kevin Na and Louis Oosthuizen. They just love to, if they get off to a bad start, they're out of there.
So, okay, explain this to me, because I feel like I understand this, but I don't know for certain. If you don't make the cut, you don't get paid. So they just say, I'm not going to make the cut, so I'm going to get out of here, basically.
Yeah, and then they usually blame it on a back injury or.
It's like NBA rest, basically.
Yeah, there was one of the more famous WDs was in the first time they played in Mexico. Henrik Stenson drank the water and had the shits on the course, so he had to get out of there. And he was the most popular player of the week, so that wasn't very fun.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, at least he was feeling the pain. Well, different kind of pain that you're feeling with your roster, I suppose. Is there anybody that you're afraid, like the guy you're afraid of fading, or the guy you're afraid of being underweight on? Who's the one that's scariest to fade?
For me, probably going to be Patrick Reed. He was playing really well before the break. He's got good course history here. Rates out really well in my model. Rates out well in our projections here at RotoGrinders. I never get him right. Every time I play him, he's terrible. And every time I don't, he plays good. So I'm planning to have very limited exposure. That means he will probably play pretty well.
Who's winning this bad boy? I know you guys pick in the expert survey. You pick 1 through 3. You pick the podium. Give me the winner.
So I like Webb. He's down to 21-1. I think he's an interesting bet. Long shots, I like Ryan Palmer and Harris English, who we talked about. They're like 60 to 70-1, depending on what book you have. And then my wild card winner is going to be Ricky Fowler. He needs to get back in the winner's circle. Nobody's going to be on him. So that'll be my wild card winner. If you bet those 4, I think hopefully you'll have a sweat at least on Sunday. Who's the favorite? You have the Vegas odds in front of you? Yeah, Rory's about 7-1, and then Rahm 11-1, JT 14-1, and then a pretty big gap after those 3. I think FanDuel Sportsbook is having they juiced up the odds for those 3, so you can get those 3 to win at plus 375, which is pretty good. You get them as a package as long as one of them hits? Yeah, you get a package deal, and they juiced it up on purpose. I still don't necessarily love it because they are all bombers, and this is kind of a shorter track, but at least you get better odds. If you just want to make one bet and cheer for it, 4-1 for the top 3 favorites is pretty good. Did you have a chance to check that weather on the fly? Yeah, so it looks like it's going to be pretty calm. Max of around 10-mile-per-hour winds the first 2 days, so not really seeing a weather edge at the moment. There could be some thunderstorms on Thursday night, so if that ends up happening, maybe the course is a little softer for the guys out there on Friday morning. So keep on that. I'll just check Ross thing like I do every week.
Yeah. Hit up Kevin Roth, chief meteorologist here at RotoGrinders, obviously. Anything else you want to say as far as this tournament? And then again, feel free to reiterate and tell the people what's out there as far as the podcast, what to look forward to, especially if you are an RG premium member.
I think that's it as far as golf content. We have plenty of it for you here at RotoGrinders. Again, we have free articles. There's 4 of them out there this week, and then at least 5 or 6 premium articles as well as 3 or 4 premium shows, podcasts, pretty much everything you could need. Definitely check the ownership projections by Trey. He's one of the best in the business, and he's constantly updating those every single day. I think this week more than any week, ownership's going to be reflected by how many touts are touting certain golfers because we don't really know form and all that stuff. So if a player is brought up on 3 different podcasts, it's probably going to spike his ownership. I do worry about that with Ryan Palmer. My friend sent me the link to the Action Network podcast, and immediately I was like, well, there's 5% more ownership because a lot of people are going to be listening to that. But so check out those. He'll finalize those on Wednesday. And then, hit up Lineup HQ. We got all of our tags there. It's just awesome. We have the probabilities, like you mentioned. I have my own ratings in there. We have the projections in there as well. And then, you get to look at mine, Tambo's, STL's, and Drew's favorite plays of the week. So I think there's a lot of good information. You could build lineups just using Lineup HQ itself. I actually added blurbs for about 15 different golfers if you just want to check those out too.
And going forward, are we going to have golf every single week? Is that the plan?
Every single week until I think it just rolls right into the new season. So I think it's pretty much every week until December, and hopefully we get some Outlaw Tour as well. I know a lot of you out there have loved doing the Outlaw and have made some money out there. So if they do have Outlaw next week, I'll definitely get my projections up as well.
Yeah, I didn't mean to besmirch it at the top of the show.
No,
I like that logo too that you were flashing earlier. The people watching a video, that was pretty nice. The Outlaw Tour, and yeah, let them have some fun, let them have a good time, and sharpen their game and all that. And I'm all for the minor league. I don't know, is that the proper term, minor league? They're still pros, I guess.
This is like the minor leagues, like below single A baseball.
No, you're gonna be back every single week with me. Maybe, possibly.
Yeah, let's do it. I got nothing else to do until basketball starts. So
cool.
Let's do it.
You are booked, so the people know you'll be on here once a week going forward.
To talk Outlaw, right? That's what
that's
what the people want to hear.
Half these guys could be in the Outlaw Tour, and I would have no idea. I've never heard of Danny Lee. I don't think. I'm just looking at the list. It's the first guy I noticed.
Actually, he's actually a pretty decent pick. Never missed a cut here. He won at the Greenbrier, which is my comp course, so I like it. Lock him in, 100%.
Danny Lee, that's my pick of the week. That's my not so much of an expert pick of the week. He's Notorious. Much appreciated. Where do we find you on Twitter if they don't know? They know. Just in case, let them know.
At RG_Notorious.
He's Noto. I'm Dean. You've listened to The Morning Grind. Much appreciated. We're out of here. Holler.